Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So, a very nice, innocent woman wants to get married, but she is only willing to marry a man if he has never made love with another woman. After several unsuccessful years of searching, she decides to take out a personal ad. She ends up corresponding with a man who has lived his entire life in the Australian outback, and he has no experience with women. She is very happy with him, and she feels that they are perfect for each other. So, they end up getting married. On their wedding night, she goes into the bathroom to prepare for the evening. When she returns to the bedroom, she finds her new husband standing in the middle of the room, naked. All the furniture from the room is piled in one corner. "What happened?" she asks. "I've never been with a woman," he says. "But if it's anything like a kangaroo, I'm gonna need all the room I can get." So I called a lady who owed me money and she didn't pick my calls. I called 10 times and still no answer. Then I sent her a message saying, "Hi, madam. I'm not calling for the money issue. I wanted to tell you that I just witnessed 2 girls fighting for your husband in town today. It was a big fight, and he was just there watching. And then one of the girls managed to escape, got into his car, and they drove away." Then I pressed the send button. After some minutes, she called, and I ignored. She kept calling, and I saw 21 missed calls from her and a message which read, "Where was the fight? Where did they go? Did you recognize the girls? Please tell me. I am falling apart." I just read and didn't respond. She called again, 5 times, and I didn't answer. Then another message from her. "I have your money. Can we meet and you tell me more?" Then I replied, "Okay, you can transfer the money so that I can go to the fuel station and refill. Then I will pick you and drive to one of the girls' place, 'cause I know them." After 2 minutes, I got a transfer alert message. My money was fully paid. I then switched off my phone and slept like a baby. So Renault and Ford have joined forces to create the perfect small car for women. Mixing the Renault Clio and the Ford Taurus, they have designed the Clitorus. It comes in pink, and the average male car thief won't be able to find it, let alone turn it on, even if someone tells him where it is and how to do it. Rumor has it, though, it can be really annoying to start in the morning. Some have reported that on cold winter mornings, when you really need it, you can't get it to turn over. New models are initially fun to own, but very costly to maintain, and horribly expensive to get rid of. Used models may initially appear to have curb appeal and a low price, but eventually have an increased appetite for fuel, and the curb weight typically increases with age. Manufacturers are baffled as to how the size of the boot increases, but say that the paint may just make it look bigger. This model is not expected to reach collector status. Most owners find it is best to lease one and replace when it becomes troublesome. So 2 guys were in Vegas and decided to hire a lady of the night to come to their hotel room. They decided to separate things, so one guy went up to the room while the other waited in the hotel lobby. After a bit, the first guy came back down to the lobby to switch places. His friend asked, "So, how was she?" The first man shrugged and said, "It was all right, but probably not as good as my wife." The second man then went up to the room and came back down a little later. His friend asked, "So, how was she?" The second man said, "You're right, not as good as your wife." So a teacher asks her class if they can use the word contagious in a sentence. A girl raises her hand and says, "The flu is very contagious." "Very good," replies the teacher. She asks if anyone else can use the word in a sentence, and a boy raises his hand and says, "My neighbor was painting her house by herself, and my dad said it would take the contagious." So 3 women convince their goofy husbands to go to clown college for a year. The men go off, graduate, and return. And now the women are gossiping about it over tea. The first woman sets her tea down, sighs, and says, "It's horrible. Ever since my husband got back from clown college, he's been pranking me. Look at this." She pulls out a small flower and sets it on the table, where it squirts water at her. Scowling, she swats it away. The second woman goes, "You think that's annoying?" She pulls out a little gift bag full of tissue paper and starts pulling it out, but the tissue just keeps coming and coming. They both turn to the last woman. One asks, "So, has your husband pranked you?" And the last woman blushes and crosses her legs with a honk. So, the mayor of a local town calls his friend John, who owns a factory. "Listen, John, we all know that Pete in our town isn't the brightest lamp, but it's a shame that no one can give him a job. Can't you see if you can give him something to do in your factory?" "Sure, I'll give him a job," replies John. So Pete shows up. They try a few things. Pete clearly is a bit slow, but eventually they find him a nice quiet role on the factory floor where he packs boxes. All goes well, but Pete every other day would complain about having a headache and goes home. So one afternoon, John walks by as Pete says to his manager, "I have headache. I go home." So John says to Pete, "Hey, Pete, walk with me." They go into a small meeting room, and John says, "I heard that you sometimes have these headaches, Pete. But you know what I do if I get those? I go to my home, take my wife upstairs, go into the bedroom, have a really good time with her, and then the headache is gone, and I go back to work. Maybe you should try that too." Pete nods and goes on his way. When John walks back onto the factory floor a few hours later, he sees Pete back at work, packing boxes. So he walks over and says, "See, no more headache, right?" And Pete says, "Yes, boss, no more headache. You also have a very nice house." So a furniture salesman is telling a mate about an amazing date he'd just been on, where neither he nor the date could speak a word of the other's language. He told his mate that he'd met her while at a conference, and despite the language barrier, they had seemed to hit it off. He said that, in an attempt to extend time with her, he had grabbed a piece of paper and drew on it a dinner plate and knife and fork. He said she nodded enthusiastically, and he took her out for dinner. He said that after the dinner, he drew a picture of a couple dancing, and that again she nodded and they went off to go dancing. But then he told his mate that the most amazing thing happened. He said that toward the end of the evening, she had taken the piece of paper from his hand and had drawn a bed on it. "What really amazed me," he said to his mate, "is how the hell did she know that I sell furniture?" So a man is walking along the street one morning, feeling hungry. He sees a sign in the window of a restaurant that says, "Try our exotic breakfast now." So he walks in and sits down at a table. The waitress comes over and asks what he wants. The man asks, "What's your exotic breakfast?" "Baked tongue of chicken," she proudly replies. The man shouts, "Baked tongue of chicken? Have you any idea how disgusting that is? I'd never even think about eating anything that came out of a chicken's mouth." The waitress is a little taken aback, but stays calm and asks him, "No problem, sir. What would you prefer then? The man says, just bring me some scrambled eggs. So a little girl was leaning into a lion's cage. Suddenly, the lion grabs her by the collar of her jacket and tries to pull her inside to slaughter her, all under the eyes of her screaming parents. A biker jumps off his Harley, runs to the cage and hits the lion square on the nose with a powerful punch. Whimpering from the pain, the lion jumps back, letting go of the girl, and the biker brings the girl to her terrified parents, who thank him endlessly. A BBC politics reporter has watched the whole event. The reporter, addressing the Harley rider, says, "Sir, this was the most gallant and bravest thing I've seen a man do in my whole life." The Harley rider replies, "Why, it was nothing, really. The lion was behind bars. I just saw this little kid in danger and acted as I felt right." The reporter replied, "Well, I'll make sure this won't go unnoticed. I'm a BBC journalist, you know, and tomorrow's news will run this story. So, what do you do for a living, and what political affiliation do you have?" The biker replies, "I'm a British Army veteran, a conservative, and I voted for Brexit." The journalist leaves. The following morning, the biker turns on BBC News to see if it indeed brings news of his actions. The BBC headline was, "Right-wing UK veteran assaults African immigrant and steals his lunch." Tired of the constant blonde jokes and the stereotype that blondes are not smart, a blonde woman decides to prove her intelligence to her husband. While he is at work, she takes it upon herself to paint a couple of rooms in their house. The next day, as soon as her husband leaves, she dives into the project. When he returns home at 5:30, he immediately notices the strong smell of paint. Concerned, he walks into the living room and finds his wife lying on the floor, drenched in sweat. To his surprise, she's wearing both a ski jacket and a fur coat. Worried, he asks if she's okay. She assures him she is fine. Curious, he inquires about her outfit. She explains that she wanted to prove that blondes can be smart by painting the house. When he asks why she's wearing both coats, she confidently explains, "I read the instructions on the paint can, and it said for best results, put on 2 coats." So a young woman in the maternity ward, just prior to labor, is asked by the midwife if she would like her husband to be present at the birth. "I'm afraid I don't have a husband," she replies. "Okay, do you have a boyfriend?" asks the midwife. "No, no boyfriend either." "Do you have a partner then?" "No, I'm unattached. I'll be having my baby on my own." After the birth, the midwife again speaks to the young woman. "You have a healthy, bouncing baby girl, but I must warn you before you see her that the baby is black." "Well," replies the girl, "I was very down on my luck, with no money and nowhere to live, so I accepted a job in a porn movie. The lead man was black." "Oh, I'm very sorry," says the midwife. "That's really none of my business, and I'm sorry that I have to ask you these awkward questions. But I must also tell you that the baby has blonde hair." "Well, yes," the girl replies again. "You see, the co-star in the movie was this Swedish guy." "Oh, I'm sorry," the midwife repeats. "That's really none of my business, and I hate to pry further, but your baby also has slanted eyes." "Yes," continues the girl, "there was a little Chinese man also in the movie. I really had no choice." At this, the midwife again apologizes, collects the baby, and presents her to the girl, who immediately proceeds to give the baby a slap on the bum. The baby starts crying, and the mother exclaims, Thank God for that. What do you mean? Asks the midwife, shocked. Well, says the girl, extremely relieved. I had this horrible feeling that it was going to bark. So a woman got up and out of bed, and as she stretched, a penny fell out of her privates. She thought it was odd, but kept on with her morning routine. She went to put on a pot of coffee, and a nickel fell out of her privates. She was concerned, but continued her morning routine. She drank her coffee and went to brush her teeth when a dime fell out of her privates. She really was getting concerned and thought, if anything else happens, I'm calling the doctor. She got dressed and started to tidy up the house, and a quarter fell out of her privates and rolled down her pant leg. Concerned, she called her doctor. She told him, a penny, a nickel, a dime, and then a quarter fell right out of my private area. He said, no need to worry, you're going through the change. So a guy walks into a bar with his pet alligator. The bartender says, get that thing out of here. It's dangerous. The guy says this alligator is completely trained and docile. Bartender says, I don't care. I don't trust it. Get that thing out of here. Guy puts the alligator up on a few bar stools. He puts his hand in the creature's mouth and says, look, it's completely safe. Bartender says, nope, get it out. The guy then pries the alligator's jaws open and puts his head inside. Bartender says, nope, I'm not convinced. Get it out. Guy unzips his fly and sticks his pecker inside the alligator's mouth. He then picks up a bottle of beer off the bar and starts bashing the alligator on the head. The guy says, look, it's perfectly safe. Does anyone else here want to give it a try? A lady at the end of the bar says, I will, but don't hit my head so hard. So my girlfriend invited me to her house, where I found her sister alone. So I sat there, waiting for my girlfriend, while her unbelievable hot 22-year-old sister was sitting next to me. A few moments later, she whispered in my ear, we should screw while my sister isn't home. I immediately got up and turned around to head back to my car. I found my girlfriend standing next to the car. She had a huge smile on her face, hugged me, and exclaimed, you've won my trust. Moral of the story? Always keep your condoms in your car. So you all have heard of the Air Force's ultra-high security super secret base in Nevada, known simply as Area 51. Well, late one afternoon, the Air Force personnel at Area 51 were shocked to see a Cessna landing at their secret base. They immediately impounded the aircraft and hauled the pilot into an interrogation room. The pilot explained that he had taken off from Vegas, gotten lost, and spotted the base just as he was about to run out of fuel. The Air Force didn't take any chances. They conducted a full FBI background check on him and held him overnight for questioning. By the next day, they were convinced the pilot was telling the truth. He really was lost and not a spy. They refueled his plane, gave him a terrifying "you did not see anything" briefing, complete with threats of prison time, and pointed him back toward Vegas. The next day, to the total disbelief of the Air Force, the same Cessna showed up again. This time, the MPs surrounded the plane even faster. Only now, there were 2 people on board. The same pilot jumped out, looked at the armed guards, and said, do whatever you want to me, but please tell my wife where I was last night. So Bob returned home early, and finding his wife naked and in bed with another man, and unable to contain his anger, fired a gun and killed his wife. At the trial, he was charged with 3rd-degree murder, a reduced sentence considering the circumstances. As he was exiting the court, the judge met up with him and asked, why did you shoot your wife instead of the man? The man replied calmly. Well, Judge, I figured it was better to shoot a woman once than to shoot a man every week. So Tiger Woods and Stevie Wonder, two legends, bump into each other at a charity event in New York. They strike up a conversation, and Stevie shares something unexpected with Tiger. Stevie says, "Tiger, I've been a huge admirer of yours. In fact, because of you, I took up playing golf." Tiger, surprised, replies, "You play golf? But how does a blind man like you manage that?" Stevie, with a grin, explains, "It's pretty simple, really. My caddy sets me up, and then he guides me with loud calls from the fairway. Even on the green, he helps me out." Tiger, now intrigued, says, "That sounds incredible. I'd love to witness it firsthand. How about we play a round together while I'm in town?" Stevie replies, "Sure, Tiger, but I play for money. My rate, $10,000 a hole." Tiger, thinking how hard could it be to beat a blind man, says, "I accept. When should we tee off?" Stevie, with a sly grin, replies, "How about midnight on Tuesday?" So a guy was driving when he saw the flash of a camera. He figured that his picture had been taken for exceeding the limit, even though he knew that he wasn't speeding. Just to be sure, he went around the block and passed the same spot, driving even more slowly, but again the camera flashed. Now he began to think that this was quite funny, so he drove even slower as he passed the area once more, but the traffic camera again flashed. So he tried a fourth and fifth time with the same results, and was now laughing as the camera flashed while he rolled past at a snail's pace. 2 weeks later, he got 5 tickets in the mail for driving without a seatbelt. So every night, a Jewish man gets down on his knees and prays to God to let him win the lottery. "Please, God, just let me win the lottery. I'll donate to my synagogue. Oh, Lord, I want to win the lottery so bad. If you let me win, I'll start a charity." For years and years, it was the same thing every single night. Until one night, he could hear his neighbors screaming and laughing. He went outside to see what the commotion was, only to find that his neighbors had won the lottery and were now worth millions. Fed up, the man went back inside. "God, I don't know what you want from me. All my life, I've asked for one thing and one thing only. Let me win the lottery. Is that so much to ask? Just one little thing. And you know I'd do such good things with that money. But now, you let those Gentile neighbors of mine win? What makes them such good people? Lord, if it's your will that I don't win the lottery, then I can accept that. But I have to know, why not, God? Why not?" Suddenly, there was a terrible crash of thunder. The heavens parted, a massive hand came down from the sky and tore the roof off the man's house. The literal voice of God boomed through the man's ears as he heard, "Because you have to buy a ticket first, you cheap bastard." So the boss has a new worker called Mike. Mike came highly recommended and has been working out great. However, the boss notices that every Friday Mike calls up and says, "I'm sick," and doesn't show up for work. The first few times, the boss lets it go. He's a good worker, and maybe sometimes people are sick. But it's every week, and it's always on Friday. Eventually, the boss calls Mike into his office. "Mike," he says, "you're a good worker. You do the work of 3 of those guys out there. I really want to keep you on, but every Friday you call and tell us you're sick and don't come in. Obviously, there's something else going on, and I don't want to have to let you go over something like this. So is there anything we can do to support you? Is it gambling? Alcohol? Drugs? What are you struggling with? No, it's nothing like that, says Mike. All right, you guys have been good to me, so I'll level with you. My sister is married to this guy. He's a real piece of work. He get paid every Thursday, and as soon as that money hits his bank account, he's out getting drunk. Mean drunk he is too. So he gets a skinful early, comes home and starts slapping my sister around before passing out. She calls me, crying. I go over and pick her up, bring her back to my house to look after her and console her. She cries on my shoulder. I hold her until she stops, and then we start kissing, and then before you know it, we're making love. The boss is dumbfounded. Wait, you're making love with your sister? Mike shrugs and says, I told you I was sick. So I was at the bar, staring down at my drink, when this big, rough-looking biker walks up next to me. Without saying a word, he grabs my glass and gulps it down in one swig. He slams the empty glass on the counter and growls, Well, what ya gonna do about it? I just burst into tears. This is the worst day of my life, I say. First, I was late for a meeting and got fired. Then I found my car stolen from the parking lot, and I've got no insurance. I left my wallet in the cab on the way home. When I got there, I found my wife in bed with another man. And to top it off, my dog bit me. I came to this bar to work up the courage to end it all. I bought a drink, dropped a capsule in, and sat here watching the poison dissolve. And then you show up and drink the whole damn thing. So Buddy and his friend Tom went out hunting. It was Tom's first time, so he was following Buddy's lead. After a while, Buddy spotted a small herd of deer. He turned to Tom and whispered, Stay right here and be really quiet. Buddy crept away slowly, but a few minutes later, he heard a blood-curdling scream from Tom. He rushed back, panicked. What happened? Are you okay? Tom said, Yeah, I'm fine. A snake slithered across my boots, but I didn't scream. Then a bear came up and snarled right in my face, but I still didn't scream. Buddy blinked. So what did make you scream? Tom replied. 2 squirrels crawled up my pants, and I overheard one say, Should we take them home or eat them now? So a pregnant woman is hit by a car. She is sent into a coma for 1 year. She wakes up, no longer pregnant, screaming, Doctor, Doctor, where is my baby? The doctor replies, Calm down, your babies are fine. You had twins, a girl and a boy. We gave them to your brother to watch while you were in the hospital. She says, My brother, that guy is a moron. Why would you do that? I am sorry, miss. We had no choice. There was nobody else. He even took the liberty of naming them. What? She says. What did he name my daughter? He named her Denise, says the doctor. Oh, well, that's not so bad. What did he name my son? To which the doctor replies, he named him Denafew.